Hello, Virgo. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to the Catalyst Full Moon forecast for this month's full moon in Virgo on March 7th, 2023. So welcome back. Welcome to Virgos. If you are new, if you are a subscriber, thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. So this forecast is going to go over the main astrological themes related to the full moon and throughout the last half or the waning period of this lunar cycle. We had a new moon in Pisces that we're going to just briefly go over for the Virgo person, of course, and then we're going to launch right into some of the big transits that are going to be coming up for the next 2 weeks. So this forecast is for the Virgo sun, moon, and rising person. If you have a strong stellium, which is 3 or more bodies or planets or luminaries in a sign, so if you have a stellium in Virgo, you have progressions in Virgo right now, you have your draconic chart, you have some strong Virgo in that, and I'll explain that in just a second, what that even means. Or if you're just trying to understand the Virgo person in your life and what the next full moon, has in store for them, this forecast is going to have something for everyone who is here looking for some information, some insight, some guidance about this upcoming Virgo full moon. So, you might be wondering, why is there a picture of a volcano in the background? Well, this is a painting of Mount Vesuvius, and for those of you familiar, Mount Vesuvius is the volcano that destroyed Pompeii. And the reason I have this and picked it for the thumbnail is because it is related to the Sabian symbol that is connected to this full moon. So the full moon will be 16 to 17 degrees of Virgo. When we're reading the Sabian symbols, we round up to the next degree up, and truly, the Sabian symbol, quite simply, for this full moon is a volcanic eruption. So I'll go into more detail about that as we get into the astrology itself. But I just wanted to put that out there because for the Virgo person, regardless if it's rising, which is what the chart is going to be directed towards, is the Virgo rising person. But even with a sun or a moon in Virgo or a strong Virgo connection in any of your charts, progressed, natal, draconic, it's not exactly an easy position for the Virgo person to be in, to really just have this kind of explosive loss of control. But here we are. And I think it's important to be aware of this potential going into the full moon, because it's through this experience, regardless of being cathartic or destructive, right? And sometimes those things are the same thing. There is a revelation that comes with this full moon, as it does with every full moon. And so there is a purification by fire that is experienced, and it's kind of this phoenix event, and the alchemical process is triggered by a catalyzing type of reaction, which is usually by heat or fire. So we're all going to experience this on some level. It's not just the Virgo people, but the Virgo people, this full moon is going to get right to the essence of who you are, how you identify yourself, the person you project into the world, the way that you adapt to the world around you as a Virgo moon. And so to seemingly lose control or to have an explosive type of event can be very difficult for a person who tends to really identify with being in control of themselves. And it doesn't mean that you lose control of yourself when you're having this type of moment, but the more that it is suppressed, the more destructive it could potentially be. And I think that's important to bring up for the Virgo person. So before we fully launch into the astrology, I just want to share a couple things with you. I brought up the draconic chart, so I am offering a sale on the galactic oversoul or the draconic chart. It's not just for starseeds, but I just put it up there because so many of my clients and the people that are part of my membership are starseeds. But the draconic chart looks at the unconscious drives or the oversoul of the person. So the natal chart represents the personality as you at the time, place that you were born into this particular lifetime, this incarnation, your personality, the person you project into the world. Now, the draconic chart is the chart of the oversoul or the unconscious drives. And so the chart shifts so that the nodal axis of the moon, which is the trajectory of the soul in order to evolve and to grow and to learn in this lifetime, shifts to 0 degrees Aries and 0 degrees Libra. Everybody's draconic chart has the nodal axis of the moon at 0 degrees Aries as the north node and 0 degrees Libra as the south node. And if this is new terminology to you and you want more information, this is certainly something we would go over in any number of readings that I would do with you. So don't get too caught up on the terminology if you're really confused. The idea here is that these charts will show the unconscious hidden drives of the person that don't always present themselves very definitively, right? And the work that I've done on my own draconic chart and doing readings with other people have showed those unconscious drives, the places where people are like, I feel this way, or I feel like I'm more this sign, but my natal chart has me as this sign. And then you look at the draconic chart and you're like, oh, that's because you are this sign in your draconic chart. And it's something that is, when you have 0 degrees Aries, you're looking at the impulse to be, the seed point of the individual, and coming into, as a soul, coming into that brand new, and being driven into that brand new seed point of experience. And since we are coming up on the vernal equinox, which is 0 degrees Aries in the zodiac. We have a new moon, actually, that's going to be at 0 to 1 degrees Aries right after the new moon. I felt like it was important to really give some space to those who are interested in the draconic chart. So that's on my website, linked in the description box below, and it's right on the homepage how to book this, and I'm offering it at a sale right now. Now, if you are a Pisces or Virgo person and you want more of a check-in of the full moon, how this lunar cycle has been going for you, what to expect, the lunar transit forecast is at a sale rate for the Pisces and Virgo people. Of course, if you are part of my membership, then this sale rate is available to you no matter what your sign is, so that's always a consideration as well. Also, go to the website. You can link right from the homepage, or you can go to the bookings tab and find this service and book. And it's just either a 30-minute check-in or a 60-minute reading about the lunar cycle in relation to your natal and progress chart, okay? Now, and the big thing I want to share, if you don't already know, is that the Reiki Healing Attunement event has already started. It started yesterday on March 1st, so today I did attunement number 2. I'm going to be sharing a video about the grid that I've made in the next installment. So this is open enrollment. It is a sliding scale for anybody who wants to join. You don't have to join right at the beginning. So if you decide later that you're like, you know what, I do want to participate in this, you can still do that. You'll be added to the list. You will receive the attunements for whatever days are left, and you'll still get some benefit out of this. So there's more information if you register. So you can either send me an email directly, also in the description box, or go to the website and find the information to register. You get the intro email. It gives you all the details, and then you can decide if you want to participate or not. So this has already started out to be really, really powerful. So those are the things that are available right now to everyone, but for the Virgo people, considering this is your full moon and you may want to have some extra support, considering how intense the symbolism of this full moon really is, I wanted to offer those things to you. So what we're going to do now is move into the actual chart itself and start really unpacking this and get an idea of what we're looking at over the next 2 weeks, okay? So we're going to bring up the chart here. So the full moon is going to be on the 7th of March, okay? And it's also in a connection, as you can see. So this is a Virgo rising chart, and you can see here that we are, I'm going to move this over to right here. All right, you can see here that Virgo is the first house. The full moon will be in the first house. So regardless if you're a rising or sun or moon, the full moon in your sign, Virgo, is going to have an impact on the way that you express yourself, how you feel, especially if you're a Virgo moon, how you feel and adapt to the world around you. And as a Virgo rising, the subjective projection of you as a personality is going to be very explosive. And considering that it is the full moon itself, it's going to be emotionally explosive. And you may find yourself being very projective, if that's even a word, about your whatever subconscious contents have not had a chance to surface and be released. Okay, so let's go back to the new moon just briefly here, which is at 2 degrees of Pisces. And the reason I want to bring this up is because there's going to be a couple transits throughout this next 2 weeks, not the least of which is Saturn moving into Pisces at the full moon. Okay, and a number of other transits that are going to be relative and relevant to the degree of this new moon, which was at 2 degrees Pisces, right? A squirrel hiding from the hunters. And I went into this in great detail with the Pisces new moon forecast, if you happen to watch that. And of course, if you are receiving the weekly astrology because you are part of the membership, then you know that there is a lot of focus on this impulse to really exercise some real caution. The thing about Pisces that there are no boundaries or borders in Pisces, right? The drop of water is the ocean, is the drop of water. Much like that, we are inseparable from the collective unconscious, from the realm of spirit, of unity, consciousness, and the imagination, the inspiration, compassion, forgiveness, unconditional love. These are all beautiful aspects of the Pisces archetype that present themselves and the opportunities to cultivate these things when we are in Pisces time or Pisces season. And when I say Pisces season, it's because the sun is in the zodiac sign of Pisces right now. So our expression of our own creative voice is identified with this realm of the seamless and the transcendental and the formless, okay? So creative inspiration, imagination, all the things that I just mentioned are something that we are each individually expressing ourselves or identifying ourselves with, okay? But what comes along with that is the need to exercise some caution and some protection, because if everything is all one, right, then it's important to understand where you begin and someone else or society ends. And Virgo is really the sign that has that on lockdown, right? As a Virgo person and the sign of Virgo, there is this mastery of blending duality in an organizational, meticulous, analytical fashion that doesn't let go of the boundary of physical reality, because Virgo is an earth sign. So what's happening at Virgo time of the year? Let's just relate this to a growing cycle so we can really wrap our heads around the sign of Virgo. At Virgo time of year, this is when the fruit is ripening. So the flowers have come, they've been pollinated, and the entire focus of that plant changes, right? It goes to putting all of its energy and resources into growing the fruit, and the fruit is ripening, it's growing. And what is the fruit but a container for the seed of the next cycle? So perpetuating the cycle of life by way of ripening the fruit. Now, the fruit is not meant to be ripened for the sake of the plant. The fruit drops from the plant. It's eaten, it's harvested, it's dropped onto the ground, and the seed propagates into wherever it needs to go based on the release of the fruit. Okay, so the fruit is not holding, the plant is not holding the fruit. It is growing the fruit in order to spread the seed, so to speak. So we've talked a lot about Draco in previous transmissions, previous broadcasts and reports. Alpha Draconis as a fixed star is in the sign of Virgo, and we'll have already passed this point by the time we get to the full moon on the 7th. But the idea here is that the Draco as a starseed origin is related to this set of traits where the perfection of form has gotten to the point of being only for the sake of the ego or the sake of the being itself. And so the idea here is that the Draco are ripening the fruit for their own ends and means, and not giving it into contract with relationship with society through the harvest, right? And you see how absolutely unnatural that really is. Doesn't mean that there's not mastery there. Of course there is, because Virgo is the sign, it's really the sign related to the hermit. And what is happening? It's all happening below the surface, right? During Virgo time of year, it doesn't seem like anything's happening as the fruit is ripening, but the roots are taking all the minerals from under the soil and giving those resources to the plant that is growing and maturing the fruit. And so it doesn't seem like things are happening, but the entire hormonal structure of the plant changes in order to support this process. And so it's all happening underground. And the Virgo person is organizing, is meticulous, is analyzing, is perfecting their own vessel, because really they are committed to reconstituting themselves, to walking the path of service and discipleship through perfection, which never reaches perfection, right? But that doesn't stop us from trying and to acting on it. Discipline, right? A certain amount of energetic hygiene goes along with Virgo, and really being committed. It is not glamorous like Leo is. It is one foot in front of the other, putting things where they belong, and using the intellect of Mercury as being the co-ruler. But Chiron as being the other co-ruler, is that eventually you have to give up everything that you have put that energy into to the harvest, right? You have to release what it is that you have perfected in order to truly be part of the cycle of life. And so, Chiron, as one of the co-rulers of Virgo, right, his own hybridization didn't even save him in the end. He had to release it. He had to give it up. And so that's where I think the Virgo person, there's that difference there. Be someone who is hyper controlling of themselves and becomes hyper fixated on perfection to the point where they can never release themselves. But then you also have very committed, very disciplined individuals that are incredibly capable of analyzing and organizing themselves and their spaces for a real service. Okay, so it's going to be, I think it might be a little difficult for the Virgo person to realize that there may be a very strong, emotionally dramatic release of energy. So I'm going to read the Sabian symbol, a volcanic eruption. This is 16 to 17 degrees Virgo. And then we're going to go into Pisces. And when we're talking about this Piscean new moon that started as an impulse to protect oneself, to exercise some caution, it's in the realm of relationship for Virgo, which is really asking a lot of the Virgo person that in relationship, no matter what the relationship is, with your spouse, with your loved ones, with anybody that you have a contractual interpersonal relationship, it brings out the surrendered, imaginative, and formless part of you, which is, clearly the opposite of Virgo, which there is a boundary there that you are working with. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out. So it's the explosive energy of long repressed contents of the subconscious. So we're dealing here with the dramatic release of energies. Now, this is coming from the Astrological Mandala, right? Dane Rudger. This book is out of print, so it's very hard to get. But there are other books that you can get that have the Sabian symbols. We're dealing here with the dramatic release of energies which have been kept in check by the outer shell of the ego-controlled consciousness. It may be a spectacular catharsis, but it often takes the path of destruction. Yet, unless some form of purification by fire, right? So water cleanses, but fire purifies, right? There's this kind of like alchemical transmutation. There's this sense of phoenix, right? This phoenix energy that comes along with the purification by fire. Unless it's experienced the inner pressure of the karmic past or of more recent frustrations. And I would say that the recent frustrations are probably have a lot to do with the relationship stuff we just talked about, which shake up perhaps even more destructively the very foundation of the personality. So Virgo, the more you try to keep a cap on this within yourself, the more destructive it's going to be to you personally. Okay? And so the objective confrontation with an image of the karmic past, right? Whatever it is that maybe you haven't been necessarily as protective of yourself in relationship as you've been in the past. You know, it's very difficult with Pisces as the seventh house because it just takes away all boundaries and you see no difference between you and other, which is very freeing for the Virgo person, but also too can leave a person being very passive and just take on everything in relationship and be almost like a martyr in some ways because you're like, oh, I'm just doing this out of service. So the objective confrontation with an image of the karmic past is replaced by a subjective eruption of repressed memories and primitive cravings. Everything must be released from the psyche, seeking to attain the transfigured state. So the soul must become empty and the mind translucent, right? So there's a big explosion coming for all of us, but for the Virgo person, it's going to come right into who you are as a person. And so you might have to confront these aspects in your relationships where you've either pushed away or you've tried to control and weren't actually going with the flow or allowing this flow or this compassion to come in, and the impulse to protect yourself has been overbearing. The other side of it is, and hiding from relationship, like completely not taking any risks in relationship. And the other side of that is that you've been so kind of locked into this idea of, I'm just doing this to be of service and to please other people, that you have completely been mowed over, right? And Pisces in the seventh house, you're just like, it's all the same anyway, so I might as well be the one that, does what I do best, which is organize, analyze, perfect my form, purify myself, be very disciplined. But it only really, and look how much is in Pisces right now, right? We have Mercury, we have the sun, obviously, because it's a full moon. We have Neptune in Pisces. It's made it very difficult to establish these boundaries. But the other side, too, is that it's been very... the capacity to really allow some of those boundaries to be released. So you haven't put such a huge cap on it. You've allowed some trust into your relationships that you are having these beautiful, transcendent experiences. And at the full moon, it's going to be very clear. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, and just an eruption in a powerful, cathartic way, or it's going to be an eruption that's like, it's going to empty you at all levels, okay? Now, Mercury is one of your co-rulers as a Virgo person, now in your seventh house, so you can use your mental capacity to analyze, to organize, to really kind of crunch the numbers, so to speak, and put things where they belong and learn from your relationships by tapping into a more transcendent and imaginative kind of perspective here. Now, of course, Saturn is about to come into Pisces with this full moon. So when Saturn comes into the seventh house, boy, you really feel the difference. You know the difference between you and other. Like there is a crowbar separation, and it can be very isolating. It can be very, it can just, and it can really enhance and in some cases thicken, the traditional or more conservative need for security in relationship, especially when it comes to more of the spiritual aspects, okay? So that's something else to keep in mind is that, with Neptune, it has been loosey-goosey this whole time. It's just like everything is everything else. There are no boundaries here. And depending on what kind of Virgo person you are and where things are for you, this may have been great or it can be completely deceptive and delusional. this full moon is going to really show, are we feeling this collective peak experience in your relationship? Are you screaming, or are you having this incredible, powerful phoenix moment where it's burning it all down and building you back up in a whole new way? Because Saturn here is going to put the foot down in terms of you in relationship. Okay, so first of all, let's go back just a little bit, because Uranus is completely involved in this. Now, look, everything in the Virgo rising chart right now is in the 7th, 8th, and 9th houses. You have Mars that's in the 10th house, so that has been charging along in your career house now for a long time actually, because Mars stationed retrograde. It's still in its shadow, right? It's still in its shadow, and it's going to come out during this time. It's going to reach that place where it's stationed retrograde, and then it's going to come out during this time. So Mars is also going to reach new territory in Gemini, right at the end of Gemini, but still in its shadow. So you're still charging forward, pioneering these new ideas, concepts, communications, expressions, ideas, the whole thing with Gemini, charging forward in terms of your career, your mission, your contribution. And it doesn't have to literally be career, but whatever your service is contributing to, that is what the 10th house is. It's your release of energy. And Mars is like, yeah, let's release it constantly. Output, output, output. And the 10th house being normally the Capricorn house, this is a great place for Mars, as long as you realize and know that it is shared resources that Mars is outputting, right? Because Mars is ruling your 8th house as a Virgo rising, right? So Mars, 8th house, your shared resources, right? This is where trust and faith are the resource that is created out of communion and cooperation. And we'll talk about it, because this whole Jupiter, Chiron, Venus thing in your 8th house is pretty strong right now. As of this recording, which is the 2nd of March, Jupiter and Venus are in a conjunction. So it's beautiful, right? But as long as you're not jumping the gun here and not trying to push something beyond where it naturally is right now, which is just in a state of potency, right? It's at the seed point. So, all right, so let's look at Uranus. Uranus in your 9th house. This is belief systems. This is sincere purpose. This is the pattern of meaning. This is experience through higher education, advanced training, travel, like foreign travel, cosmic travel, and mystical cosmic vistas, right? This is the 9th house is the big picture, right? And it's where our understanding and our wisdom really are generated. And it's like the dome of the firmament. It's the whole thing, right? And so with Uranus here, you've been going through for however long Uranus has been in Taurus or in your 9th house, if you're a Virgo rising, kind of this unsettled but also very quick, rapid change, a complete conversion in terms of belief systems and your sense of the big picture and your purpose, okay? So the fact that Uranus is involved in this full moon is really important, because Uranus rules your 6th house, which is the house of the Virgo person. It is the traditional sign of the 6th house, which is Virgo, which is your service, which is your works, your labors, your hygiene practices, your energetic hygiene, your physical hygiene, and start to think about those things as one and the same, right? Because they're not meant to be separate in terms of I have my spirit and then I have my material, because they are meant to be intertwined with each other. So Virgo, the fact that Aquarius is your 6th house, I mean, it's just goes to show that the collective resonance is where your work is. So Uranus ruling your 6th house is, I think, really important to this whole conversation. So right before this full moon, the sun is in an exact sextile to Uranus. And this is such a great transit just in general, because it really allows for, creativity to be stimulated, pleasant surprises, stimulating encounters, something new and exciting, comes along that you should try, right? And you have the freedom to do so. There's also increased self-awareness, right? Because the sun is how we each individually express ourselves. And so increased self-awareness can come through flashes of insight, or maybe interactions, or feedback from interactions, right? So, but your creativity is stimulated. And when we talk about 15 to 16 degrees of Pisces, and you are identified with your relationships right now with the sun in Pisces, this is when you are tapped into the creative flow, when you're tapped into a quiet space. Maybe you need to be listening, right? Maybe you need to be identified with the whole feel of your relationships and really listen in order to receive that inspiration. And then that leads to this flash of insight in terms of what you're doing. And not even what you're doing, but what's your purpose? And what is the meaning of those relationships? Because we don't have a template for where we're going. And this is what Uranus has been sitting on for, weeks now at this degree of 15 to 16 degrees Taurus. Like, it is confirming what's been substantiated, but it's not necessarily giving us the template of where we're going, which is kind of perfect for Uranus because it is very future oriented. It's a flash of insight. It's changing, it's flipping the script so that you kind of are forced to open your third eye, you know what I mean? Which is useful and important when you are grounded. And thankfully this is, Uranus is in, Taurus, which is fixed earth. And so, but even your own grounding can be disrupted with Uranus and Taurus. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that when you're listening, when you're identified with the entire feeling of your relationship and willing to find that silence and that stillness, there is a sense of inspiration that comes with this sextile because, and there's curiosity, there's inventiveness, and like I said, flashes of insight. And when you're talking about relationship, you may meet somebody new. You might have really stimulating encounters through your socializing that you normally wouldn't have. Chance encounters, right? That's people come out of the blue that you're like, and since we're talking about spirit, we're talking about Pisces, you may find that this is a connection to your guidance system, your connection to angels that are your guardians, the spirits of the land that you live on. But I think too, also, just the people in your lives that you may meet. Okay. And so it's very easy to get distracted, which is why it's also important, especially Uranus, obviously, to get distracted. And so again, finding that quiet space is a really important part leading up to this full moon, because it's not going to be quiet once we get to the full moon, because there is a big karmic confrontation that comes with this that, again, is important. And it's important and it's stimulating with the moon in a trine to Uranus, right? You can have these stimulating moments without too much dramatic upheaval, but it's also at the full moon is where we get this kind of eruption, where we get this really strong cathartic release. And it doesn't have to be terrible, but we're talking about a collective peak experience that is going to bring something out in the Virgo person emotionally. And the good news is that we have a number of, all of us, but Virgo in particular, since it's hidden right to the heart of who you are, how you identify yourself, we have a couple of days before the transits start really picking back up, okay? So one thing that came out really clear is, beware the Ides of March. Wow. And we'll get into, and this, again, it's going to affect everybody. But once we get to our third quarter moon on the 14th, and we get to the Ides of March, which is the 15th. And if you don't know what the Ides of March is, that's when Julius Caesar was assassinated. And once we hit the 15th and the 16th, it is on. I mean, the amount of transits that are happening at this point of 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, it's just on and on and on up to the vernal equinox, which is on the 20th, and then our new moon, which is right on the 21st. So take some time with this full moon to really allow it to integrate into your experience, which is what the full moon represents. You get this illumination, this revelation, okay, what is working, what cannot continue. And as the moon moves through your first 3 houses, especially leading up to the South Node in Scorpio, really give yourself the opportunity to let that experience integrate, to feel into who you are, the world around you, and its balance. And then certainly where we've all been karmically as the moon comes into Scorpio. So let's start looking forward into that space, because there's just so much to cover once we get to the 3rd quarter moon and the Ides of March that I feel like that if we went through every single moon transit, we'd be here for like 2 hours. So, and I'm not doing that. And you don't want me to do that either. So, because we all have attention spans that have been that have been influenced by TV and the internet, so there's no getting around that. So we go through Wednesday, the 8th, we go through Thursday, the 9th, and like I said, everything's really situated up in these first 3 houses at the top of the Virgo rising chart, social identity, okay? And so the Virgo person is really focused most of the time on what they are doing, their analysis, their perfection, their service. And so to be really focused and have all of this energy focused in the idea of who am I in society is really where so much has been, especially since the new moon. It's been this impulse that has been driving along the top of the chart. But now you see who have you been in relationship, Virgo, and the full moon is going to be that cathartic release about it, and then you get this chance to start integrating it into who you are and how you express yourself, okay? So we come into Thursday, we come into Friday the 10th, and we see that the moon is in a trine to Mars. It is coming into conjunction with Arcturus. And so I do want to point this particular transit out because it's really quite lovely, actually. So before the moon comes into Scorpio, we have the moon conjunct Arcturus, the star of Arcturus. And so for you Arcturian starseeds, you want to pay attention. And this is kind of a double starseed activation, because then you have Mars in conjunction with Orion. So it is still in its retrograde shadow. It is not left yet, but this particular, whenever you have the moon in a trine to Mars, this is where you have courage and the initiative to act. You will intuitively know what to do. And it's okay in a transit like this to be a direct and assertive. So Arcturian starseeds and Arcturus in general, when you have connections to this, right? There are very strong opinions, deep philosophical knowings that the Arcturian starseeds are connected to, because this is not just information. This is truly a resonance of how the universe is balanced and how it is organized to be balanced, right? So Mars in this degree of Gemini, there is this sense of resistance that is used as a means to increase the competitive spirit and the assertiveness, right? That there is a layer of ice that we're skating along, and without that ice, how would we ever be able to skate along it? You see what I'm saying here? And so Mars, in the same way with this Orion, and the Orion starseed nature is to embrace the duality, as this resistance gives me something to push against, to perfect my skill. And as a Virgo person, this perfection is something that you are always striving to, but you're perfecting yourself. In Gemini, it is more of like, I'm learning, I'm practicing, I am getting better at my skill set, my technical set, whatever it is. And without the resistance of keeping score, of having an opponent, a competition, having ice to skate across, the resistance is what gives us the opportunity to kind of triumph over whatever that resistance is. And this trine to the moon in Arcturus is this very deep knowing, this intuitive sense of where the fulcrum actually is in that process. And you will intuitively know what to do. We'll all do that, but it'll be in the sense of your resources, your actual resources in the second house, to Mars acting on your contribution of those resources, right? And it is the fact that those resources are actually never really, they're infinite, right? Because it's in the duality that you find the tripod, so to speak. And so if you are an Arcturian starseed and you know that, or an Orion starseed, or both, then this transit on Friday the 10th is going to be something really important to, like, I know where my resources are, I intuitively tapped into them, and I know exactly how to act on them, and you're not deterred by the resistance. The resistance is just like, you know what, this is exactly what's going to drive me to be more assertive, to intuitively know what to do and have the initiative to act on it and not be discouraged. So that's a really important transit. Because right after that, when the moon comes into a square with Pluto over here in Capricorn, these last degrees of Capricorn, this is where there's power struggles and gaslighting and destructive behaviors can really come about as deeply buried feelings are exposed here, and being very clear about, the full range of knowledge can really... the best case scenario here with a square to Pluto like this from the moon is that it can really eliminate some bad habits, because you are kind of seeing and feeling the full picture of everything in terms of your resources, okay, Virgo? Because again, so much up here has to do with who you are in relationship, your social identity. Who have I been, and who am I becoming? And being able to intuitively tap into your resources and what that actually means to you, where you get those resources that are inherent to you, is going to be really important, because it's going to have a lot to do with accessing the power of your voice, okay? Virgo. So then the moon comes into Scorpio right after this, and it's going to meet the south node, K2, the descending node in Scorpio. Now, before that happens, there's also a trine to, so you can see here that as we get through Friday into Saturday, before the moon comes into Scorpio, it's going to have that square over to Pluto, but then it's going to come into Scorpio and have a trine to Saturn. Now, Saturn is now in Pisces, and even though it's going to go retrograde like it does every year, it's not going to come out of Pisces. It's going to stay in Pisces. Okay, so Saturn is now here in Pisces, and the first decan of Pisces is ruled by the Eight of Cups, right? It's going to be very heavy for a minute and very frustrating. The illusion is going to lose all of its attraction at this point. And believe me, Pisces can be very illusory and deceptive. And when Saturn comes in, we're going to be like, uh-oh, shit. You know what I mean? The illusion is going to lose all of its luster and attraction, and it's just going to put the foot down here. And this is, again, having to do with relationship, okay? So this is happening as the full moon is happening. So that might also be part of your cathartic release of just like, uh-oh, what have I been doing in relationship this whole time? And maybe you are purifying yourself in that through that realization. So the moon comes into Scorpio, which is not easy, ever. And shout out to all us Moon and Scorpio people, because we know what this brooding really feels like. And it's very easy to just sink into the abyss of who you are and your own shadow when the moon's in Scorpio, right? Because you're just sinking and you're sinking and you're sinking. So just remember that the moon is still very bright. And so if you, instead of sinking, if you can see that it's a reflection off of the water, then you don't get lost in sinking down to the bottom. But still waters run very, very deep, and you don't want to stare so long into the abyss that you fall into it or think that that is you. And that happens with the moon in Scorpio. So the trine over to Saturn as the moon comes right into 0 degrees Scorpio, 0 degrees Pisces, that it really gives a sense of emotional strength and patience to handle very sensitive issues, which is we're all in this now, and we're all in this together, and we're all being impacted in the same way. And Saturn at 0 degrees Pisces is like, it's time, everything has to go to market now. There's no more, I don't want to say there's no more time, but Saturn is about time, and eventually the growing season is over and everything goes to market, right? And for better or for worse, and everything is put out on display, and we're all kind of commingling and having commerce all together, and that's kind of the best case scenario. But Saturn is just like, there is a time and there is law of nature here that is handling this. And so emotional strength with there's a sense of widening our experience at 0 degrees Scorpio that we're kind of accepting emotionally. And so it gives us patience. It gives us emotional strength. We can rely on our instincts in some ways. And ancestral guidance with a moon in a trine to Saturn is really strong. And so if you already have connections to ancestors, this is a great time to tap into it. If you are wanting to make those connections, this is a good time to sink in a little bit more, or be open to the insight that comes through dreams, through impressions, through intuition. Just remember, it's in Scorpio right now, so it's going very deep. And also the moon and Saturn rule opposing signs. So when they come into a trine, this is one of those moments like, wow, they're not only working together, but they're completely supporting each other emotionally, right? Because we have 2 water signs here that they're representing. So this is a good moment because we're still in this full moon phase at this point. So we're still integrating and now coming into the 3rd house, which is where those patterns are picked up on, where, it's the world right in front of us in the 3rd house. It's learning, it's language, it's communication, it's the back and forth to work, it's the back and forth with your roommates, your household, your siblings, it's your environment right in front of you. It's your nervous system functioning, the 3rd house, right? And so the moon coming into the 3rd house, you become very intuitive and picking up on patterns that normally you wouldn't pick up with just the mind. And so the moon's going to come through the 3rd house, and it's going to have this conjunction with, let's look at it. It's going to have a conjunction with the south node of her, her own south node at 5 degrees of Scorpio, kind of reminding us where we've been and allowing us to connect to this place of where we have been, which is, the inertia of the power of our relationships, of what we produce in relationships, not even the relationships themselves, but what we produce in these relationships, which is either trust, which is faith, which is return on investments, which is the what's produced being more than the sum of its parts, and how powerful those connections really are. And to the point where it's like the shoreline is being bombarded by the waves of the sea, and it's not going anywhere. And your mind and the capacity to tap into the deepest truths, it's not going anywhere. So I think that this is also an important moment in that full moon moment, because right as it passes over here, as we're going to see, then it's going to come into the disseminating moon. So there are 2 big transits that are happening on the 11th. So we're already starting to, it's like the full moon didn't have, period, from Virgo through to this point in Scorpio, didn't necessarily have a ton of big transits with the planets themselves. Now we get to the disseminating moon, and we're going to start having them. So number 1, you see that Venus and Mars are in a sextile. Ooh, this is really good, right? This is one of the best transits for socializing and romance, because it's Venus and Mars working together and creating something more than themselves, right? This is a sextile, so that 60-degree angle is like bringing 2 opposing forces together and transmuting internally, right? And again, the sixth house is the Virgo house, and the 60-degree angle, or the six in numerology, right, is this harmonious connection, but we have to actually act on it. So again, Mars is skating along the ice, recognize it's so motivated by the resistance, and be like, you know what? I am going to skate along this resistance. Without this resistance, how could I prove myself, right? So Mars is really feeling it. And this is a great time, like I said, for socializing, romance, especially Venus and Mars, right? The masculine and feminine. Great time for self-promotion, initiating a project. And where's Venus in Aries, right? Venus in Aries is just coming off of, she's been transiting Andromeda, okay? So she's just coming out of Andromeda. She's still technically within the constellation zone of Andromeda, but she is not conjunct any of the stars. But still, she's transiting Andromeda right now. And this is about being open to the influence of spirit, just like the curtains of a window, right? So imagine the windows are open and the wind blows in and the curtains take the shape of like a cornucopia. That's actually the Sabian symbol. So it's the influence and the translucence of our own self that is being influenced. It's like breathing the breath of life into the seed. And that's Venus. That's our embodiment. That's our sense of beauty and harmony and potency. In a sextile to Mars, it's just like, I am going for it. I am using this resistance as motivation. And then we get this influence from spirit. Wow, this is really strong. We're going to need this as we go through the Ides of March. So I find this to be very strong. And where is this for you, Virgo? Your 8th house of your shared resources, right? Sex, death, and taxes is the 8th house. And your 10th house, right? Your career, your contribution to society, the release of your power. So it's like Venus in the 8th house really brings a warmth to the idea of sharing and a magnetism, and especially in Aries, she is hot to trot here, right? There is this sense of celebration and this sense of almost sexual fire in some ways. You know, you may be feeling it this way, but it can also have to do with your shared resources, with the process of really getting to the bottom of where your power stems from in relationship, and being open and receiving something. And it's in that receiving, in terms of shared resources, that Mars is even more motivated to be like, I'm gonna actually I'm actually going to push even harder. Okay, so, but you have to be very mindful what is blowing through the window here in this area, because this is deep, this is dark, this is your subconscious. Okay, so you have to be very aware of that as well. Okay, and the moon is in Scorpio meeting the south node, so it's important to realize how deeply sensitive we all are, and how deeply sensitive you are to your own consciousness right now, to the world around you, and how powerful that dragon tail is in this area. It's propelling you forward into not just what you know, but what you understand, which is where the north node is, your purpose. Okay. Boy, oh boy, Virgo. Jeez. And then you also have, at the same time, on this day, Saturday the 11th, we're going to have Mercury in Pisces come into a sextile with Uranus. So we're going to have a connection to your 9th house with your Uranus by the end of Saturday. So actually more like the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. So 3:30 p.m., roughly 4 p.m. And this is exactly where the sun was in sextile right before the full moon. So where it was the sun and it was more of our creative expression, now we have Mercury, which is your chart ruler, in the same position of relying upon our inner source of inspiration in order to learn about ourselves, and for you, Virgo, in relationship. Okay. and to be inspired by the relationship. And again, exciting and stimulating conversations into, purpose and meaning of your relationships, new discoveries from your dreams and flashes of insight. Again, open-mindedness, future-oriented thinking, especially with Uranus in the ninth house like this, can lead to ingenious discoveries, right? So the stage was already set with the sun here, and now your chart ruler comes to the same place, having the same connection, and you have your consciousness and the collective consciousness working together in these areas, and you're seeing things from a different point of view now that it's going to really help you solve a problem, okay? And now we're in the disseminating moon phase, which means that the moon is representing that waning gibbous where the message is being conveyed. And it's up to us to either hear it and to convey it, right? So with the moon in the third house for you, Virgo, I would say that there is a potential to kind of emotionally interact with those right in front of you, and to maybe be more intuitive about your expression or your communication with the people right around you that is going to be part of you being like, how learning about your relationships, having that insight, making these discoveries about the meaning of it all. And I would say that this is going to be really enhanced when the moon comes into a trine with Mercury later that day, or into Sunday morning, as you can see. So this might be something, depending on where you are, that you going to have come out in your dream state. But this moon trine to Mercury at this point, let's see here, is where these dreams and memories are become way more vivid, and you can communicate much more intimately and read others really easily, and your intuition is very much balanced with your rational side in a transit like this. Now, keep in mind, right before this happens, you can see here that the moon was opposite Uranus, so there's going to be kind of this moment of just like, kind of getting bounced around a little bit, where there's emotional upset. So there may be this moment here where somebody or you is having an impulsive reaction. You have such a strong need to emotionally feel this freedom in terms of your belief system or your meaning, that you kind of, bait and antagonize people in your relationships, emotionally antagonize them. Or somebody in your life may do that. Your instincts and your intuition are not working properly with a moon opposite Uranus. So it's not exactly how you don't necessarily want to make decisions about relationships. You just want to feel into what the hell's happening in this moment. So there's unexpected events. There could be mood swings. Emotional detachment will strain the relationships, because I think there's going to be this sense of like, I want to engage the people right in front of me, with what I know and make a conscious choice. But Uranus is like, yeah, but there is no, how are you going to do that when there's no real understanding of what your purpose actually is? And then you come right after that. I think this is what kind of soothes this in that moment, which is you don't necessarily need the other people in your immediate life to agree with you or to be on the same page with you. It is when you realize that you yourself are responsible for, your communication and how you express yourself and what's coming out of here, that really you're going to actually feel this kind of peak experience in your relationship. I mean, there will be this sense of like needing to, I feel like, you want to make this conscious choice in relationship and reach out, and it may not go the way that you want, and you may have this kind of dramatic upheaval, but from there's going to be kind of this moment of realization of like, oh, I'm responsible and have all the capacity emotionally to create from my own consciousness. And I think that's also going to allow, again, to assess the situation, to read other people more easily, and to not get caught up in the drama so much as learn from what you're experiencing in the relationship itself, and realize that still informs you and gives you the capacity to create from within your own consciousness. And like I said, the moon trine Mercury is really your intuition balanced with your rational side. Now, one of the things that's also happening on the 12th, as you can see, is Jupiter. This is like exact. And so again, possible dream time. It just depends on when you're awake and when you're sleeping. But this is at 2:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday the 12th. Jupiter and Chiron are exactly conjunct, right? At 15 degrees Aries. So there is this real potential for getting rid of all of like the negative attitudes that we've been holding on to that have been kind of holding us into a wounded state, right? That Chiron state of I have to heal everyone else in order to achieve the release of my own suffering, but it wasn't and kind of accepting like, oh, my hybrid state, whatever that means to you, this is how I'm going to help everyone. And it's really Chiron had to give it up in order to really release himself from his own suffering. Even though his capacity was, far, surpassed everyone else in terms of astrology and healing and divination and all of these things. When Jupiter and Chiron are conjunct, there is this increased need for understanding and wisdom and awareness about these types of themes. And we have this moment where we can actually have we can be responsible for fulfilling our own healing in this moment in Aries, right? Which is all about our potency and impulse to be. It may be a time where we are reconsidering our personal belief systems about these types of attitudes about being a savior, being a victim, how we approach the healing of other people and our savior complexes possibly. So while that's all happening, then you have this opposition to Uranus. You also have this trine over to Mercury. And I feel like that there's so much clarity that can happen. And where's Jupiter and Chiron? In your 8th house of shared resources. Virgo, you do not have to be everyone's savior, okay? And in fact, it's in this conjunction that I think is going to, like I said, reorient your belief system and your understanding and wisdom about, well, what is it that that motivates me to be of service to other people, right? Is it if they pick up what I'm putting down, or is it at the end, how I am actually fulfilling my own service to myself and the Great Spirit, to God, the universe, whatever. So these are important questions I think are worth asking, because it's going to be a lot of disruption that's going to lead us all to asking these questions. Now, the moon's going to trine the sun. Ooh, I love it. I love moon trine sun. Okay, it's one of the best, especially when we're talking about the lunar cycle. So let's go ahead a couple hours here and take a look at this, and then we're going to really focus on the 3rd quarter moon and the Ides. Oh my God, so intense. And again, we're starting to get into this. There's a lot of comfortability, confidence, inner peace, harmony, and it's going to have a lot to do with the ability to find a healthy outlet in terms of your expression, your words. You may have a lot of pent up aggression and emotions here that you're going to have to find a healthy way to release them, and it's in that you maybe maybe it's you have to find the right person to talk to. Maybe you are talking to God, right? Or praying. Maybe you're journaling. Maybe you are just finding that right person to talk to. Or maybe you are releasing all of this pent up energy here with the moon in Scorpio in your 3rd house by identifying with the full form of your relationship and what it's all about, right? I mean, 22 degrees Pisces is Moses coming down from the mountain, right? There is a spiritual mandate. You may have a calming influence on other people as well. And I feel like that's a big part of this transit, is being a calming influence on other people, because you are expressing yourself in this really it's like a release valve emotionally, by being able to communicate something or calming other people in that moment. Wow. So let's go to the third quarter, right? So we're still in the disseminating moon phase, right? I mean, so as the moon has been moving through Scorpio, through Sagittarius, this is where emotionally we are disseminating the message. We are basically making the most out of what was revealed to us at the full moon. So let's kind of just take a moment here to look at this, what's happening during this time. The waning phase, right, is a demonstration of conscious intent from the full moon. So there's a lot here, Virgo, that you're going to have to, as this intense energy of the moon through your third and fourth houses, or through Scorpio and Sagittarius, demonstrating conscious intent of carrying out your full moon vision. And so there's a need to have increased awareness of the objective participation in this process. It's not something that you can just react to now. You have to be on the front lines of this. And it produces a mounting sense of responsibility, or a sense of defeat. That's, that can very easily, especially with all this Pisces energy in your seventh house, you mean, like, what's the use, right? Well, that's not very Virgo-y of you. I mean, but I could see that very much happening if you feel just completely formless in all your relationships, that you don't have a leg to stand on, or that you've been trying and you've been trying and you've been trying, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. But this is part of what you are putting into action from the full moon realization. So when we get to the 14th and the moon is in Sagittarius, this is your fourth house. So the moon in your fourth house, you're about to get very sensitive to where your power is coming from. And we come to the actual third quarter moon itself. Just you wait until we see what's going on. Look at that. There's going to be a T-square with the moon in a square to the sun and Mars. Okay, so this is definitely worth focusing on, because Mars is so close to coming out of its retrograde shadow. Okay, so now, like I said, the third quarter moon is a crisis in consciousness. This is a ideological crisis. It's the element of conflict is really strong, because the sun is identified with this cathartic purging of all the corruptive aspects of relationship for you, Virgo. And it's breaking down all the idols, right? There is everything from the last quarter moon perspective and the degree that the sun is in. It is breaking down everything, and it tends to create a lot of crisis, either physiological or social, at this moment. And the sun in Sagittarius is like, yeah, but what about all of the potential power here that I have access to? This is going to be the real crisis, because you're just going to be you feel like you're completely just swept away by what's happening in relationship, right? And again, this can be any type of relationship, Virgo, but the moon is down here in your fourth house, where your power is truly coming from, kind of in this rhythmic anticipation of like where you are going. So you don't want to get necessarily caught up in what's happening exclusively in relationship. You want to, at the very least, identify like where your power is still coming from and where it can be coming from. It doesn't have to completely be coming from relationship. Now, the T-square up to Mars is just stripping everything away other than the essentials in terms of what your contribution is. So career, the institute of your family structure, your release of your power. So let's break this down a little bit. So, and the sun is also the sun and the moon, Mars and the moon are both coming into a square with Neptune too. So this is getting really gnarly. So let's look first at the opposition to Mars. And when we have a T-square, you want to find the ghost point, which is back in Virgo, right? 24 to 25 degrees of Virgo, which is a flag at half mast. Okay, the idea that you, Virgo, are working towards being of service so much to, the whole, that you will be recognized by the whole when you have finished the course of your work. Okay, now, first, the moon opposite Mars, right? Moody, short-tempered, impulsive actions, aggressive instincts. It's best to fight for a good cause, or what? Protect the vulnerable. And boy, you're vulnerable in your relationships, that's for sure, because you are a Pisces person. And you can be the subject of aggression outside of you. Virgo, I think that this is also really strong potential here, and is really something that the third corner moon is going to be like, why are you attacking me, right? Like, why am I being subjected to this? And you may find yourself wanting to act out in terms of impulsive and aggressive instincts, to be like, you know what? I'm just going to burn it. I'm going to strip all of this down to the bare essentials. So just be aware of that. Now, the moon square Neptune at this very same time, right before Neptune squares Mars and comes into conjunction with the sun, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of emotional insecurity, you're questioning reality. So you see what I'm saying here, as we get, there's deception and hurt from emotional sensitivity. And if you are suffering, be sure to tell someone, look for support, and you may be that person. But there's a lot of confusion and emotional security around this T-square. This is going to be really, really difficult. And for Virgo people, I feel like that you're going to feel it in your relationships, and you're going to be like, why is this happening? And you may find yourself acting out with Mars in terms of your contribution, your career, your mission, and just, wanting to aggressively just strip it all down. Don't forget where your power is coming from, and that just because things are changing in terms of social identity now doesn't mean that you have lost all of your power. Okay, now Mars square Neptune, exactly, as you can see, is low energy, suspicion, lies, scandals. It's normal to feel weak and discouraged, okay? You may feel some guilt after recalling how you've hurt someone in the past. You have to face things, right? And this could also be part of the overall picture, that you may come to terms with how you have treated other people in your relationships, and you may be dwelling on that. There's a lot of suspicion and paranoia. You can get very vindictive with a Mars square Neptune, and the temptation is to act against others due to your confused motivations. So be wary of others who seem too good to be true, and don't let your fears get the better of you. Honestly, this is a great transit to mind your own business, especially with the moon in the fourth house like this, to just be like, you know what, I'm just going to go back within to where my power is. I'm going to realize, where that's coming from, maybe reconnect with the people that are you're loyal and faithful to truly and always have had your back. You may need to be apologetic or acknowledging, people you've hurt in the past or you've pushed away. And your immunity may be compromised, especially when we're talking about the moon and Neptune here. But this transit of Mars and Neptune, you can see, beware the Ides of March, okay? Because the sun will conjunct Neptune on the Ides of March the next day, and it's 26 degrees of Pisces. Now, this is an interesting symbol. 26 degrees of Pisces, the idea here is that a new moon divides its influence, and the idea here is that everybody's going to start breaking off into their own direction, because the seed point is the latent seed that's ready to come into being sown, right, at the vernal equinox, or initiated or infused with the spark of life. Everybody has their own karmic journey that they are finishing up and coming into a new one. And so when the sun conjuncts Neptune, there's increased intuition and empathy, more but you're going to be more affected by the thoughts and feelings around you, especially in your relationships. Kindness is going to seem like a weakness to the people who are vampires in some ways. So, and very susceptible to false prophets, because you become much more interested in the spiritual aspect again. Setting boundaries is so important so that you can enjoy your relationships with this transit. And it's almost like you'll have no choice, because everybody has their own direction to go. And you have to kind of accept that and allow your ego to be sublimated so that you can enjoy yourself in your relationships. You can actually connect to the people that you love and that you care about in your relationships. Your intuition and empathy can increase without the danger of being susceptible to basically psychic vampires and false prophets, right? And negativity is going to affect you. So you may have to just you may have to step away, or you may find yourself realizing, you know what, this is your journey. It doesn't mean that I have to necessarily believe or give into all aspects of what you're doing in order to enjoy our togetherness. And that's something that I've had to learn in my own relationships, especially with the work that I do and like how it is taking me, because you find yourself being like, oh, nobody gets it, especially the people that are really close to you. So Virgo, you don't want to take it personally when it comes to these types of situations. And the 16th, we continue on with these transits. The sun's going to square Mars. Mercury is going to meet Neptune. Venus is going to square Pluto. Whew. This is on the 16th, guys. So, and you see here that, so the sun is going to be in a square to Mars. So Mars is already squared Neptune. That was very confusing. Then, and your motivations are very foggy. Okay. And so then Mars squares the sun. And this is a test of character from those competitors and those enemies, right? So people like the boss man are going to be looking to assert their power in this situation, and it can be very reckless and impulsive. Those types of behaviors can be very dangerous. The best way to deal with an energy like this of the sun in a square to Mars is to take a defensive position, right? You don't want to be on the offensive. You want to be able to defend yourself and block and send it away, right? It can lead up to a buildup of anger and resentment, and you need to find a way to release all of this hot energy that is building with Mars and with the sun. And so, like I said, defensive position in this way, especially because there's going to be kind of this culmination moment with the sun in Pisces, and a sense of wanting to shoot out from this protective area that Mars has been in, because now truly it's coming out of its retrograde shadow and it's ready to shoot out of its encampment for the first time in months. And so be aware of that. That somebody's going to be on the attack mode, and you don't want to meet that with the same offensive behavior and risk some sort of dangerous thing, right? Take a defensive position and find a really healthy outlet, because know you're going to be tested here, especially Virgo rising people in terms of your career. Maybe you are the person that is going to be offensive. So you want to also find a healthy outlet for this and not do damage in your relationships here. Mercury is also going to be in a conjunction with Neptune at the same time. And this is a really good time to kind of get focused on the arts, your enhanced imagination, okay? Focusing on the spiritual topics and focusing on those aspects in your relationship. Now, the other side of a Mercury conjunct Neptune, it's pretty clear, right? Thoughts and words can be twisted by confusion, fear, and paranoia. There's deceit, there's treachery, there's lies. So you have that, and you have a sun square Mars. Just be ready for it, that people are going to twist your words. They're going to go on the attack. You may find yourself on the receiving end and be very confused and paranoid when it comes to relationships and who's in them. So And then you have Venus square Pluto. And this is a transit where people become very overbearing, they become very controlling, and they become very threatening because they're actually very insecure and they're worried of losing control in relationship. And again, Venus is in your 8th house when this is happening, in a square to Pluto down here. And what's happening is the moon is also in Capricorn in your 5th house. And so when the moon's moving through the 5th house, that moodiness and your expressiveness of it can get really strong, and you have to be aware of that and really take a sense of emotional seriousness and responsibility at this moment, Virgo, so that you don't get pulled into all of this shit show that's going to be going on around this time, okay? And then Mercury squares Mars on the 17th. Like, it's just endless, right? So we're coming into midweek into St. Patrick's Day. Boy, this is a terrible time to be drinking a lot. Rushed thinking, short-tempered, aggressive, jumping to conclusions, open hostility, Mercury square Mars, and it's really vital that you're listening carefully in your relationships, that you are finding controlled activity to channel this energy. It's not a good time to try to negotiate anything. Just listen if people are really acting this way towards you. Don't get into the rush thinking and aggressive, short-tempered perspective, because again, you're going to want to shoot out the gate here, because Mars is out of its shadow. And you don't want to jump to conclusions, right? There's going to be arguments. So you may not get out of this, but it also feels to me like it's kind of a culminating point about relationship in general that needs to be kind of addressed. And the moon, like I said, the moon is in Capricorn this whole time. And then we're going to have a Mercury cazimi, right? Mercury conjunct the sun. Where are we here? On the 18th. Okay, Mercury conjunct the sun. This is mental alertness, quick thinking, keen to express your identity through the interactions that are right in front of you, right? Sharing ideas, making plans, and this is all in your 7th house of relationship, okay? So all of a sudden, you're going to have this kind of harvest moon moment where you're just like, oh, it's like everything is consummated. So I feel like there's going to be a lot of tension and argument and fighting potentially in terms of you and relationship, Virgo, and you in relationship, that eventually you're going to come to this moment of like, ding, right? The light bulb's going to go on with the Mercury cazimi and the last degrees of Pisces here. 27 degrees Pisces. It says, the harvest moon illumines a clear autumn sky, the light of fulfillment that blesses a work well done, right? And so there's a consummation here. This is a karmic moment, and the seed of the new cycle, it's already latent. So it's mostly going to be becoming aware of it and being like, oh, I get it now. Or maybe all the work you've been putting into it or yourself is finally going to pay off. Venus is going to sextile Saturn. And this is where we get back to the new moon at 2 degrees Pisces, because Venus is now in Taurus, right? In her home. And 2 degrees of Taurus is an electrical storm. Sextile Saturn at 2 degrees Pisces, a squirrel hiding from hunters, right? This is about taking a practical and common sense approach with our resources. And for you, it's going to have a lot to do with, again, your relationship resources, and your status in relationship. And certainly with Venus now in Taurus, in your 9th house, and the sense of the value of the meaning and the purpose. You're going to kind of get this bolt of, between this and the Mercury cazimi, it's going to be like a bolt of lightning of just like, oh, I see it now. And you may be wanting some comfort or some companionship in this moment. And I think you're going to have to find a way to soothe yourself in that moment, because Saturn in Pisces like this is going to be like, if you put yourself out there too much, you're going to leave yourself open. And Venus at 2 degrees of Taurus is like, yeah, the lightning strikes and it does damage, but what else has it done? It actually has balanced the situation out. It's like a homeostasis with lightning. So, and I'm talking about natural lightning, not artificial lightning. Mercury is going, oh my God, it just never ends. Mercury is going to sextile Pluto on the 18th, and then it starts to calm down, because then we come into so now we're in the balsamic moon, right? And so this is not a time to be making decisions. This is a time to really just kind of sit with this moon cycle as it is finishing up, and the seed is about to be re-sown of the next cycle, which will be our Aries new moon at 1 degrees of Aries. So these last couple of days, as we're leading up to the vernal equinox, Venus is going to meet the North Node, which is, Virgo, whatever's going on in relationship for you, whatever it is, whoever it is, the nature of it is about to go through this huge overhaul that is going to just be all over the place. And you're finally going to get to a point right before the equinox where you're going to understand the value and really feel and embody the whole purpose of it has been brought you a place where you can just let it go. Okay? And then the vernal equinox is on the 20th when the sun comes into 0 degrees of Aries, okay? And the moon will be moving back through Pisces and the balsamic moon in this moment, okay? And on the 21st is when we are going to be, wow, this is really long, guys, when we're going to be having the next new moon, which will be on the 21st. It's going to be 0 to 1 degrees Aries, just where the vernal equinox is. So I know that this is a really long report, but wow, I mean, there's just no way to not go into those things without being kind of like super generic about it. And I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to give all of these transits the time they deserve, because for the Virgo and Pisces people, for the people who are Virgo and Pisces sun, moon, and rising, especially, this is impacting people in their identity so much right now, how they express themselves, how they feel and adapt to the world around them, and the person they project into the world is going through huge change. And the person they are in relationship, especially for the Virgo people right now, who they are in relationship is changing so much as a result of all of this whole cycle. So I know it's long. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm sure over the next 2 weeks, there will be times you'll come back to this and be like, okay, so what's going on in this date? Scroll forward. Okay, this is the Ides of March, where Dee talked about the third quarter moon and the T-square with Mars and stuff like that. So there's value in this throughout the next 2 weeks. So don't feel necessarily pressured to listen to the whole thing right now, because there'll be things that come up later that are going to be really important to come back to. So Virgo. Wow. You can't save everyone, but you can save yourself, and you can perfect and work on yourself. And that is really what is going to be revealed to the Virgo person at this full moon. So don't try to cap it. It may be hard to let go a little bit of the control of yourself as you go through kind of this cathartic, explosive moment, but know that in that process, what you discover about who you are and who you've been is really important. So that you can actually work to protect yourself and not just give yourself over. Or the other side of that is to be so hyper fixated on controlling every aspect of yourself that you have not allowed yourself to have a relationship with life and to really tap into the full spiritual potential of your relationships. Because the Virgo person is the disciple. And without that very human and very earth-connected experience, there is no transcendence. And the Virgo people, you are the representatives of this. So, wow. If you need any assistance, you're interested in a reading, you want to be part of the Reiki Healing Attunement event, all of those things are accessible through my website, okay? So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. And I will see you on my next broadcast, whoever and wherever you are. God bless you. Thank you so much. I love you guys. I'll see you later. Bye.